One of my favorite things about the Cubase equalizer is that any audio-based channel already has an EQ on it, so you don't have to install it or insert it on a channel if you want an equalizer. Cubase assumes that you will be using EQs on all of your audio-based channels, and that's why there's already an EQ for you there to use. And there are a number of ways to get to the equalizer. One way is from the project window, simply by clicking on the E button to reveal the channel settings window. Another way to do it is in any version of the mix console, you can click that same E button and it will reveal the same equalizer. The equalizer itself has 4 individual parametric bands plus a high cut and low cut filter, but let's remember the signal flow going through the channel settings window. It starts here at the gain, then it goes through the high cut and low cut filters, then it proceeds through the inserts and the strip, and then the strip itself will determine where the equalizer is positioned within those effects. So by the time it gets to the equalizer, it will have already passed through the inserts and some strip effects. Now to come back to the high cut and low cut filters, these are powered on and off individually. You can change how steep the slope is, either from 6 dB all the way down to 48 dB per octave, and then to adjust the controls of the filters themselves, you would click and drag to the left and right, because these controls, like all of the other controls on the default view of the equalizer, are set up as horizontal faders. So you would drag each of those fader controls to the left or to the right. And I'm going to reset those filters for right now because I'm not going to use them on this channel. Then the Cubase EQ is comprised of 4 fully parametric EQ filters: low, low mid, and high frequencies. And there are a number of different ways to craft the EQ for each one of these filters. One way is to turn the power on for an individual filter, then adjust the gain, frequency, and Q factor of the filter itself. The low and high mid-frequency controls have 2 different types of filter curves. There's parametric 1 and parametric 2, whereas filters for the low and high filters have a whole bunch that you can choose from, including those 2 parametric curves, or you can choose a low shelf shape, 2 different high pass shapes, or 3 different low shelf shapes. Or on the high filter, you can still choose those 2 different parametrics, or a high shelf shape, 2 low pass shapes, or 3 different high shelf shapes. And when you adjust the controls here at the bottom of the EQ window, you'll see that the graphic representation of that filter changes with the settings underneath. So the frequency goes from left to right, the Q factor is how wide or narrow the filter is, and the gain is how much you're boosting or cutting that filter. But my favorite way to make these adjustments is to actually use the node itself. You can drag the filter up to boost, down to cut, left to lower the frequency, right to raise the frequency, and then once you have a setting established, you can hover over the node and use your mouse wheel to control the Q factor. And double-clicking on a node will reset it back to its factory off position. Now, for those that don't like the sliders, you can also change the equalizer to knobs instead. That way you can either grab the knob and turn it up or down to adjust the control, or if you hover over it, you can use your mouse wheel to make fine adjustments or any adjustments in between. And if you would rather see the spectrum view and the filters themselves, you can also turn off the controls as well. That will give you a bigger spectrum view window. But I'm going to turn that back on so that we can see what's happening in the equalizer. On this particular guitar solo, I think it's a little bit buzzy, and I think it has a little bit too much throatiness in the low end. So let's take a listen to it. Now that I have some playback happening, I can see the spectrum view. And even though there's not a lot of high frequencies happening there, I'm going to click on that line and I'm going to pull down some high frequencies there at the top. But now I've lost some of the high mids, so I'll come here and turn on another node and turn up some gain right around the 2.2 kilohertz range. I'm going to take some of the throatiness in the low end out, in the low mids, and I'll want a fairly wide Q factor for that. And then maybe I don't want to have a lot of low end in there, so I'm going to come to the low cut filter, which is now a knob, and I'm going to raise that until I start to see about 100 hertz. So it's going to really cut that filter down quite a bit. Then I can listen to the before and after by using the bypass button. And if I wanted to start all over again, I could just double click on each one of those nodes, or there's a special preset for doing exactly that. So if you click the preset management button right here and load preset, scroll to the very top and find Reset EQ. When you double click on that, it will reset all of the nodes back to off, but since the low cut and high cut filter are not part of the actual equalizer, you'll need to turn those off individually. So you can bypass that filter or turn it off completely. And next, let me show you other places where you can find the same equalizer.